On this episode of the Easy Prey podcast, I talk with Dr. Eric Cole about the cybersecurity risks with a sudden shift to employees working from home. With more than 30 years' experience, Dr. Cole is a distinguished cybersecurity expert and keynote speaker who helps organizations curtail the risk of cyber threats. Eric has worked with a variety of clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies to top international banks to the CIA. He has been a featured speaker at many security events and also been interviewed on CNN, CBS, Fox, and 60 Minutes. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey podcast. Eric Cole, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share your expertise with our audience.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Great to have you. So one of the crazy things, we're recording this in late March. In the U.S., we've gone from a small percentage of the population from working from home to suddenly a very large percentage of the population working from home. We've seen internet service providers struggling to keep up with the bandwidth of everybody streaming Netflix and YouTube, in addition to all the people that are now working from home for their employers. I know when these things are planned for, companies and employees are really good about, or can be good about, taking cybersecurity into play and looking at, well, what do I have set up? What do I not have set up? But when this happens all of a sudden, and it's the mass migration to being online, what are some of the things that companies and employees need to be doing to make sure they're protecting themselves and their companies from cybersecurity risks?
Yeah, that's a great question because, like you said, most businesses, when they're making decisions, rolling out new services, they sort of always step back and say, okay, what's the functionality? What's the benefit? What are the security risks? And can we live with those security risks? How can we mitigate those? However, with everything that's happened so quickly, that second question is gone. It's pretty much survival mode. How can we get our employees up and running as quick as possible? Functionality wins. Who cares about security? And that becomes very, very dangerous because a couple of factors. One is people assume that their home network is secure and protected. Mm-hmm. Many people were never meant to run their business off of their home network. So the first recommendation is I take a couple minutes, if not hire a kid or a neighbor kid because they're smarter about technology than you anyway. They'll take $50. It'll be great. And lock down your wireless access point. Make sure that it's up to date. Most people patch their computers. They don't patch their access point. They have passwords like ABCD, and now people are going to jump on that, and they don't have the encryption in place. So spend the 5 or 10 minutes making sure that you're locking down, protecting, securing that. Next, remember that when you're in the office and you're checking email, surfing the web, and doing all those things, you're behind typically 5 or 6 different levels of security that are protecting you that people completely forget about. You now go home and all that's gone. It's pretty much you and the internet. So a couple of factors is make sure you're upgrading that operating system at home. I know a lot of people are working from home and they still have Windows 7. Mm-hmm. I have one person with XP and I'm just like, no! So make sure you're up to date. It's not perfect, but get the latest endpoint security product. Make sure you put that on your system, update it. And then this one is a little controversial, but I will stand by it with the data. My company has looked at 387 malware attacks that have come out with Corona that are all looking like Corona emails and information and updates. People are emotional. And 100% of them, 100%, all run on Windows operating systems. We have not seen any phishing or any malware attempts that run on iPhones, that run on Macs, that run on other platforms. So when I'm telling people it's a short-term fix, not long-term, because the attacker is going to adapt, but I recommend that when you're doing that first pass-through email, if you're going to be clicking on links, opening up attachments, anything on Corona, anything emotional, use an iPhone, Android, or iPad. Just don't use Windows for doing that web surfing and that email. Right now, you're emotional. You're not going to be thinking straight. Take the operating system that's being targeted just out of play. And that's sort of one of those non-conventional ones. And then the third one that I recommend is companies are quickly moving to the cloud and they love free. Why should I pay $79, $100 when I can get Google Docs for free, I can get Dropbox for free. I stay away from it. If you're running your business, you need to pay for the commercial service because free isn't free.
Yeah.
Free, they have access to your data. They're monitoring, they're using it for marketing. It's a higher risk to your business. Spend the money. It's not a lot of extra money, and go with the commercial-based services.
Gotcha. So let's go back to the wireless and dig in a little more detail if you want.
Awesome.
Because I know lots of people, when you say make sure your router is up to date, what does that really mean? Most people, they go out to their local big box electronics store. 10 years ago, they bought the cheapest router they could. They threw it in there, and it's been kind of this set it and forget it. What does updating your router really mean?
So a couple of things. One is it's a computer, just like your laptop, just like any other computer. And there are vulnerabilities that have been discovered over the last couple of years, and they just came out with a new one for Linksys, which is what a lot of people use. There's another vulnerability. Now, the good news is Linksys came out with a patch, but you have to actually apply it. So what that means, updating your router, is going to your computer, opening up your browser, and most you're either going to enter in 10.10.10.1 or 192.168.1.1.
Yeah.
You can just Google it online. Just look at what your home router is. If it's Linksys, it's Netgear, whatever the model is, and just say, how do I update my Netgear, my Linksys? Put in the model number, and it'll pop right up. It'll show you how to do it. It's real easy. You would just connect with your browser, and then you click the update button. Mm-hmm. Same thing if you don't have encryption turned on. You just click on encryption. You click on change your password. Let's be real generous. Let's say you're a slow learner. It's going to take you 5 minutes to research. It'll probably take you 2, but I'm being conservative. 5 minutes to research it, 2 minutes to update and do the changes. So in less than 10 minutes, you're now in a much better position and much safer than you were 10 minutes prior. And one of the things I always remind people of when it comes to cybersecurity, and I know you know this, you're going to pay the piper. So you either pay now or pay later. So my question is, do you want to spend 10 minutes now patching, locking down, and updating your router? Or do you want to wait for 2 to 3 months when your data is stolen, your identity is stolen, and then you have to spend 300 hours trying to clean and fix everything? So it's really your choice. 10 hours now, 300 hours later.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I know I've helped out a few people over the years, and hey, I'm having some problems. Can you check my home network? And I've gone over to a friend's house, and the router's like 10 years old, and I'm like, oh, you need to replace this thing, and they're like, oh, well, but it still works. I'm like, well, the problem is, while Linksys or D-Link or whoever it was, they were providing patches for it. Some of these companies will stop supporting routers after 5 years or so. So you really need to make sure that if there is patches available, that they're patches from the recent time frame, not that the last patch is 2012 or something like that. That should be a red flag, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If it's something where your current router is something you might see at the Smithsonian Museum, you probably want to upgrade it.
Yeah. And then one of the pieces of advice I always give people is make sure that you have the password that you type in when you connect up to your Wi-Fi, or when your friend comes over to connect to your Wi-Fi, is to make sure that password is different than the administrative password on your router.
Yes.
Because what you don't want is there are some tools out there that'll help you crack passwords to join a network. The last thing you want is that person then to be able to get on your router and start changing the settings without you knowing about it.
Exactly. And the one thing I do want to sort of inject here, because it changes people's perspectives, most people are thinking just somebody's stealing my data.
Yeah.
And I hear all the time, listen, my kids are just using it for school. I'm just doing basic surfing. I don't care if somebody sees my data. Let me give a different twist to it. And we've seen this attack last year, but in the last 3 to 4 weeks, we've seen it increase, which is cyber framing. So I'm home. I want to commit crimes. I want to do pornography or things like that. So what do? I connect to my neighbor's wireless access point, and I use that to do all that criminal activity.
Yeah.
Now, if law enforcement or others starts tracking down or monitoring, it's tied to you and not the real criminal. And unless you live on a 100-acre compound where anywhere you look, you can see your land. So if you see anybody, you can shoot them. But in most of us, where we live on smaller plots or apartments or condos or big cities like New York with the lockdown, I predict this is going to be a huge, huge problem where these cyber criminals are just sitting back laughing because they can just pick whatever access point they want and use that to commit the crime and almost zero risk to them.
Yep. And that's definitely also one of those risks that, like, if a router can be compromised, it doesn't have to be your next door neighbor jumping on your router. It could potentially be someone halfway around the world is connecting up through the insecurity in your router. And now, they're industrial espionage, whatever government hacking they're doing. So it could even be worse as well.
Yes.
And I know you also talked about free cloud services. Is there any other kind of drilling down into that, things that people should be care about when it comes to either free software in general or specifically free cloud services?
It just comes back to me, I think free is the worst word in the English dictionary. I always joke with people when I do keynotes, I'm like, I hate the F word. I think the F word is the worst. And everyone's thinking of a different F word. And I'm like, of course, I'm thinking of free. What people don't realize is free is not free. Think about it. How in the world can Google be a multi-billion-dollar company on free services?
Yeah.
How can Facebook, how can these companies get away with free services and making tons of money? It's because it's not free. They're using your data. They're accessing your data. And what I always tell folks is don't take my word for it. Go in and just post similar messages. So go to Google Docs or go to Dropbox and pick a topic. I don't know why I did this with my friend yesterday because he didn't believe me, but we picked blood pressure medicine. So we started typing in high blood pressure, my cholesterol is really high, all of this stuff. And we posted maybe 10 messages over a 60-minute period. Mm-hmm. 2 hours later, I get a text from him. And let's just say there was some interesting words in there where he was like, Eric, all of a sudden now, when I'm checking with my email, when I'm surfing the web, everything is about blood pressure medicine, and he's like, it really is being tracked that quick and that fast. So if you don't want to take our word for it, prove it, but they are using your data. And as soon as you go commercial, they don't do that anymore. So they're going to make their money either by you paying or them selling your data. Which do you want? And in my personal opinion, whether it's apps on phone, whether it's social media, what's anything, if it's not a commercial version that I'm paying for, I don't use it.
Yeah, it comes back to, I think I originally heard this about with respect to Facebook. It's that story of if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Bingo. I love that. That is awesome.
It's a great quote because it helps you realize that like these platforms cost significant amounts of money to use. If they're not charging you for it, they're making their money somewhere else. And that really has to be a huge red flag for you of like, well, how else could they be making money off of me using their service if it's not coming directly out of my pocket?
Exactly. Yep. You got it.
Just from running whatismyipaddress.com, I see a lot of people saying, well, I want to use a free VPN. Whatever this company is, they offer this free VPN service that allows me to have privacy and security. And it's like, well, VPNs require servers and data centers and network engineers. They have to be making money somehow from you. So is your data really secure? Is your surfing habits, are they really private when you're using that platform? They might look that way, but they probably aren't if they're offering you a free service.
Yeah. And what I always tell people is, I know we're always rushed for functionality, but step back and just ask the question you asked. Use some common sense on saying, okay, if this is really free and they're staying in business, clearly there has to be some exposure points they're not telling me about.
Unless they're a charity.
Yeah, exactly.
But then again, you know where the money's coming from. People are donating it to that charity to keep them in business. When it comes to a corporation, if they're not a charity, where's it coming from?
Exactly. Yep.
So you also talked about two-factor authentication. I think most people are familiar with SMS or text message two-factor authentication, where you log into your bank website and they send you a text message and you have to enter that code back in order to be able to access the site. Are there more secure methods of two-factor or multi-factor authentication?
There are solutions that are a little I use the word harder very loosely because they're not hard, but take a few extra minutes to set up. So you can actually install applications from free applications to even they have small business versions like RSA tokens and others that you set up on your device or phone, your computer that you're using, and then it will automatically generate, and then you can automatically paste it. So once it's set up, it's a quicker, easier solution, but it requires a little more work and a little more energy. But the thing that I always emphasize is recognize with two-factor authentication. The company will never, ever ask for that two-factor. Yeah. We have seen scams now. I'm dealing in an expert witness case where somebody lost $10 million on Bitcoins because they got a message from the provider saying, hey, we need to test your account. We just sent you a one-time password. Can you let us know what it is so we can verify your identity? And they did it. And then they used that to be able to access the person's account. And the scariest thing with that is because technically the person gave the credentials and the person allowed them in, you're actually liable and not the bank.
Yep.
And most people don't realize that. So while I'm a big fan of two-factor, I always emphasize to folks, no matter what somebody says or does, never give away that second factor. And what I actually prefer over two-factor authentication is account monitoring. A lot of these banks and services and e-commerce and all these others, they have a lot of good security built in. That's the good news. The bad news is it's turned off by default. So you have to go in and you have to turn it on. Now, most people are focused on the two-factor authentication, but I'm all about prevention is ideal, detection is a must. If somebody really wants to get into your account, even with two-factor, they will. What I prefer to do is have account notification. So if somebody is logging into your account or even attempting to log in from a different IP address, you get a text notification. If somebody tries to do an EFT, an electronic fund transfer, out of your bank, you get a notification. If somebody tries to make a purchase and sends it to a new address that you've never used before, you get a text notification. And that little bit of visibility can stop most of the cybercrime. Because what a lot of people don't realize, especially with fraudulent bank activity, the secret number is 24 hours. If you catch it within 24 hours, it's usually reversible. But if you wait 3 or 4 or 5 days or even the end of the month and you do it, that money is long gone. And if you had liability because it wasn't protected or you gave it away, you could actually be out that money. So while authentication and prevention is important, turn on the notification, get that visibility. So if something weird and strange is going on with your account, you know about it immediately and can take action.
Yeah. I remember reading a story, or really actually a fairly sophisticated scam where the scammer would call the victim and say, hey, I'm calling from whatever bank. It looks like someone is trying to set up a wire transfer in your account. We just want to verify that it's not you. And so they they forge the caller ID so it looks like the call is coming from the bank, and they don't ask for any personal information. And then what happens is they actually forge SMS messages. And so they send out an SMS message that looks like you're getting a message from the bank. And they were able to get into the account and craft text messages at the same time. So it looks like they're actually helping you, and they're saying you get a text message, and the person on the phone says, oh, just respond yes to that text message. And what it is they're in the account, and they have now set up a new outbound transfer. And you saying yes has confirmed that, yes, you're authorizing it. And so they're coaching you thinking that you're actually increasing your security while they're sitting there siphoning away your money while you're on the phone talking to them. It's crazy. It's almost, if someone calls you, don't trust them.
That's what I always tell folks is I never answer incoming calls. So if my bank leaves me a message or my bank says there's an issue, first thing I'm going to do is go into the app on my phone. And second thing is I'm going to call the bank.
Yeah.
So I would recommend if you get a call from your bank where they're saying that, say, hey, you know something? I'm going to call you right back. And if they're like, okay, call us right back, that's fine. It's probably okay. But if they're like, oh, no, you can't call us back because I'm going to be busy, and they start making excuses,
then
your antennas should go up and say, Houston, we got a problem.
Yeah, I guess there's one other thing in terms of kind of along the same lines for people that are working from home. I assume there's going to be a lot more scams targeting businesses. We know that Barbara Corcoran lost, and luckily, that 24-hour window, lost and recovered almost $400,000 because someone faked an email from her assistant to her accountant saying, hey, we need to transfer this money for this new real estate deal that we're doing. And because the work from home accountant wasn't paying attention, it was a fake email address.
Yeah.
And they started to file off the money. And at some point, the accountant CC'd the real assistant, and the real assistant was like, well, we didn't authorize this. Yeah. And so it's when we're working from home, we have to be careful of, are we really, if someone is calling us or texting us claiming to be our boss, are they really our boss?
Yeah. And that's one of those always out-of-band verification. So if you're getting an email, and my 3 requirements is this: if you get an email that has an emotional response, where you get a little emotional, it has an urgency, and something feels a little off or unusual, pick up the phone and verify it. It's worth that extra 2 minutes because, we're seeing the number of scams via email just go exponentially through the roof because you can't walk next door to the person's office and ask them like in a physical office.
It's really, when we're working from home, we just kind of need to take a deep breath. Anything that strikes us urgent, emotional, like you said, okay, is this really from who it claims to be from? How can I verify it by means other than how they contacted me?
What I joke people, especially working at home, is paranoia is your friend. I use the old lines we used at the CIA: trust no one, admit nothing, and make counter accusations, right? So just get a little more paranoid and assume that any email or any communication is probably evil. And if you operate under that sense, you'll actually be protected during this work from home epidemic.
Just make sure you don't cuss out your boss via email.
Exactly, yes.
So in terms of like keeping your computers up to date, you talked about operating system. Is there anything else that people need to keep up to date on their computer, and specifically?
Any of the software, any operating systems, anything you're running has patches available for it. So make sure you're patching it and look for the subcomponents. Like, for example, the ones that everyone misses: Java, Adobe. Those are support pieces that you don't think about all the time, but also are often prime components of attack. And then, of course, any endpoint security or any additional protection you have in place, make sure you're updating that also, that you're getting the latest information to detect any new attacks.
Gotcha. Those are really valuable. I know there was something that had just kind of rung in the back of my mind. I've seen a lot of posting on Facebook about, in the last couple of days, Zoom bombing, where people who are not part of your company are jumping in on Zoom calls. Is there anything that you know of that can protect people from that sort of situation when you're, either your self-awareness while you're on your Zoom calls or teleconference or video conference, however you want to call it?
So a couple of things there is most of these services now, because of this increased usage, you can actually set a passcode for each message. Because I actually have that where I have my conference bridges that I use with Zoom and Uber, and everyone knows them. So, I mean, if you just want to have fun, you could probably dial in at any random time and potentially listen in on a call. So first thing I recommend is set the additional passcode. So every time you're doing a conference bridge, somebody has to enter in that passcode. Other thing I do is we have the login app. So every one of my calls now, my assistant, she actually will look at who's dialed in, and she will go, Eric, it looks like you're on the line, I'm on the line, Bob's on the line, and Sally's on the line, but there's a 5th person that we don't know who it is. And then we say, please identify yourself. And if they don't, then you can actually knock them off the call. Now, the frustrating part, and the reason why I go back to the passcode, is they can keep dialing back in and you can keep knocking them out. So it's just, this technology was never created for evil people. It was assuming everyone was good, moral, and ethical. So I would just say have multiple lines and start setting passcodes for everything. A little bit of an inconvenience, but well worth the extra level of protection.
Yeah, particularly if you're discussing your accounting and your corporate, your secret corporate plans to take over the world. You definitely don't want people hearing and hearing those things. I know one of the other things that I've seen is a lot of people taking pictures of their home setups, kind of the selfie. Hey, look at me! I'm sitting at my desk. And they're taking pictures of their work computer screen as they're logged into their work platforms.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things we also have to be careful, not just who's in the conference calls, but, if we're sharing our screens, what are other people seeing? You and I are doing a video conference as we record this podcast. What's in the background that people can see? Can people see sensitive material, bank account statements? Things that you don't want them seeing or don't want to have access to.
Exactly. I'll just add to that from a practical, just general embarrassment is assume that all your calls now have video and get dressed in the morning. I just did a call this morning. I kid you not. It's so timely. And we're all dialing in. And I'm like, Jeff, why would you wear leopard skin underwear? And it took him a second. He's like, Eric, how would you? And he's like, holy crap, my video. And I'm like, dude, seriously, man. I'm like, come on. It's like, put on. I mean, now you don't know what I'm wearing below the waist, but at least I have a shirt and tie on. So assume that your video camera is on and always dress appropriately, because that's sort of what I call the Jeff Bezos move, right?
Yeah.
Where you inadvertently show more than you would like. So
yeah, it's definitely not something you want to happen. It's kind of one of those you really need to, while you're at home, really think that working from home, you really need to think, I'm in my office. How would I look? How would I talk? How would I behave if my boss were sitting next to me? And if you're kind of doing those things, you'll probably be safe from a lot of the issues that'll be gotchas when you're working from home.
Yeah.
So if people want to learn more about what you do, or are there any resources that you have that can help people from working home, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I actually wrote a cyber guide specifically for this, where I go over 5 core areas. 3 of them I mentioned. There's 2 additional bonus ones they can get. But if you go to secure-anchor.com/cyberguide, secure-anchor.com/cyberguide, I have a free guide that you can download, share with your employees, that just gives you some more of the practical steps for protecting and securing yourself while working from home.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. And if people want to follow you on social media, how do they find you?
DRERICCOLE, Dr. Eric Cole. So my handle, and almost from LinkedIn to Instagram, which I'm still not sure why I'm on Instagram, because that's what my kids use, but my team says I need it. But Facebook and all those, it's Dr. Eric Cole, DRERICCOLE.
Great. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I know that the information that we're providing to people will help keep them safe and secure as they work from home.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for spreading the message and keeping people safe in cyberspace.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Pray podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you know and leave a review on iTunes. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Dr. Eric Cole can be found at easypray.com/7. Have you been the victim of a scam, and are you interested in sharing your story with the Easy Pray audience? Head over to easypray.com/mystory to learn more.